Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome in to Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Sam Sprunger. That right there, that's Tony Hollinsworth. Tony, how are we this Friday?
I mean, it's Friday. It's a great day. We got basketball coming up this weekend. We have basketball tonight. We got basketball all day, everywhere. And the best part is we can watch that instead of having to watch the abominable creation that is the Super Bowl, where we want both teams to lose. America did not want the Super Bowl. Nobody wanted the Super Bowl unless you live in Missouri, Kansas, and or the state of Pennsylvania for whatever reason. But yes.
I will still we're still celebrating the Super Bowl by coming up with different creations for food. I don't necessarily need to watch the game. Meh. Had it been somebody else, maybe, but definitely not the matchup that is going to draw somebody like myself who doesn't really pay much attention to the NFL anymore, and it's just not.
Even as somebody who does, if I have to pick between obnoxious Taylor Swift loving Kansas City Chiefs fans obnoxiously talking about how they want a three-peat, or I have to listen to Nick Sirianni try to claim something outrageous like he's football Jesus or something. Don't know if he would do that, but his attitude and cockiness, I could see him 1,000% trying to say that. I'm going to pick the dark magic that is Overlord Taylor Swift and the Chiefs three-peating.
Why can't they tie? Can we just ask for a tie?
I'd be down if if there's like an earthquake, not enough to hurt anybody, but enough to be like, oh, we can't continue the game. Oh no, just nobody wins.
A snowstorm in New Orleans. I know they play indoors, but that's what I mean. Let it snow indoors too.
Let it snow, just no heat. Not enough to hurt anybody again. No frost, no hypothermia. Just
that's right.
Super inconvenient.
We're not playing it. It's not convenient. But a lot on the docket today, Tony. A lot of basketball happening the past weekend for the Big Ten. We have a new leader in the Big Ten men's basketball conference race. The Purdue Boilermakers at 10-2 with a victory in Iowa City on Tuesday, coupled with the second straight loss for Michigan State on the West Coast. Dropping at Michigan State to 9-2, Purdue at 10-2. The Boilers are back in first.
They are. I have and I always feel bad because, I consider you a really good friend, and I'm like, okay, I know he roots for Purdue, and I feel bad whenever I hate on Purdue, but then I meet like another really annoying Purdue fan, like I have in another group chat, because he's a Purdue and a Kentucky fan both. And it's not even like, okay, if you're a sore loser, I can kind of get that. He's a sore winner and a sore loser, because the first thing I get from him is the Big Ten runs through West Lafayette until further notice. I'm like, you're half a game above. Calm down. Like it
could change tonight.
It could change 1,000%. I'm like, chill there, bud. Like, let's be realistic about this for a second. Nobody is doubting Purdue. Just chill. But yeah, that's why I always feel bad, because I'm like, yes, Purdue is back in front, at least for the moment. And believe it or not, as much as I've said it throughout the last few weeks of the show as we talked about men's basketball, you know who is still there and they're still in third place? Michigan. I'm like, what is happening? I don't understand.
Well,
you're making me seem like an idiot.
I think the biggest thing is you're expecting what they have been, and this is what they are now. Dusty May, I think, he changed the culture of what it is in Ann Arbor to be a Michigan Wolverine, and I'm not his cheerleader. I'm not an apologist for him. It's just I think he is that good of a coach to where he's brought in those players that he knows that he's going to fit into his program, his style. That's one thing that he doesn't he didn't come in going, oh, this is what I need to do because it's Michigan. It was, here's what I'm going to do, and we're going to make Michigan a better team, like it has been in so many. When Jim Beeline was there, my goodness, they were good. Absolutely horrible to play Michigan at home, on the road, didn't matter where. neutral court, they were well disciplined and they were a good team. And I'm not bagging on the previous coach because I didn't like him as a player. I just don't think he was made out to be a college coach long term. He had a lot of things that came through that really just they didn't show well, especially, and they kind of gave Michigan a black eye. Yeah. And that culminated in an 8-23 season last year with a 3-17 record in the Big Ten. And I think that is what you're used to, Tony, and they're different than what they have been.
Yeah. And I will say, too, kind of to a little bit of Juwan Howard's defense, having been the previous coach, there's two parts with it. You know, he ended being a professional basketball player in 2013 with the Heat, and then immediately transitioned over to being an assistant coach for 6 years down in Miami before he took that Michigan job. And part of the reason why he got it is because he is a former Michigan player. He's a former alumni with them. I think for a lot of former players, when they come back to their college as an alumni and they're going to be, you know, they're kind of brought in as almost like the saving grace and like the golden child of, oh my goodness, look at this great player that we had for so many years as a player. You know, can that transfer over to being a coach? And I think, much to your point, for him, I think it was a mixture of, you had a ton of pressure because of the expectations that you have coming in, having played there, having had success, and the fact that realistically, this is your first time being a head coach. You're going to have a lot of pain. You're going to have a lot of growing pains. You know, we saw it, and, you know, you, Dalton, and I all talked about it for the last few years of, he had a really bad temperament issue. I mean, getting into altercations with our coaches when he was frustrated, and not to dismiss or even, you know, be mad at the passion, because we all kind of like to see the passionate coaches,
sure,
because that's the guys that they care. And you know, maybe it's even to save their job. Maybe, you know, maybe it's even money, obviously, you know, helping them. And maybe even for some coaches, and I think the truly good coaches, that they're there for the players, not necessarily for the money or the wins. They want the kids that they're coaching to succeed. That fire is nice to see. But for him, it was kind of all of the opposite. It's not that I think he wanted the kids to fail. It was, he was so personally set in, I think, wanting to just win, and having that hard time of still kind of being a professional, taking the loss, taking it with as best of grace as you can, and being able to move on with it. So it is a little bit of a shock to go from that to now a coach that seems to be very well established, seems to have a good culture, and seems to have brought Michigan basketball back to where it at least used to be, you know, face value, and it being his first year as a head coach anyway. Now, that'll be a lot be said to, you know, 2-3 years down the road, if that's still the case or not. But at least face value for what it is right now, the future looks good in Ann Arbor for Michigan basketball, at least.
Well, for him to have taken somebody like Florida Atlantic, and I don't know if you know the Dusty May story of him taking the job at Florida Atlantic, but he took the job sight unseen, basically, and he shows up and finds out that the facilities are absolutely atrocious. He called his brother and almost said, I'm really thinking about maybe pulling out of this deal. He decided not to. They got a new facility down there. He ended up taking Florida Atlantic to the Final Four. And played a really good San Diego State team really well. It took a last-second shot for San Diego State to beat them to go to the final game. And so I really think that, like you said, his culture that he brings with him is very, very, you know, look, the proof's in the pudding. We've done it. I just need you to buy in and believe at what we're doing. And I think that goes a long way. Juwan Howard didn't have that. Yes, he made it to a couple of Sweet 16s, but he didn't have that. He didn't have the, look, I've set the culture to where we've gotten to a Final Four. You know, we're constantly going to be a good team. We're going to be traditional. We're going to be a tough win, a tough beat on the road, at home, doesn't matter. teams are going to really not enjoy coming to Chrysler or hosting us because they know we're going to come and we're going to play lights out most nights.
Yeah.
Are there going to be stumbles? Sure. I mean, they didn't play very well against Purdue, but that was on a Friday night in Mackey Arena after Purdue had laid an egg against Ohio State on Tuesday prior. It was kind of the perfect storm. That ain't happening in Chrysler Arena.
Yeah.
You know, Purdue's not going to go into Chrysler Arena and beat that Michigan team by 30.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it speaks to looking at, like you said, his story. Fun fact, I also didn't know he was from Terre Haute, Indiana. His alma mater is also IU.
Yes, he was a manager for Bob Knight.
But his coaching career, though, I mean, he was an assistant coach for 13 years.
Yeah.
Before he even became the head coach of Florida Atlantic, much to your point, as far as, building him up to build that new stadium. And kind of every year, they got better and better. They hovered around the 17 wins, fell down to 13 wins during the COVID year. Well, yeah, during the COVID year, post-COVID year, one of the two. Went up to 19 and 15, then they went 35-4, and, ended up going into the Final Four. So, I mean, he's done fantastic. And like I said, between his culture and, again, I think a lot of that coaching experience is what kind of helped him. I think for Juwan, it's a mixture of he was still kind of freshly removed from being a player. Now, I know that was also, let's see, he took over Michigan in 2019. That was only 6 years after he finished playing. So he still kind of got that player mindset of coming in there. Whereas Dusty, okay, I've got more of that coach mindset. I've been a coach or assistant coach for, a really long time. He started in 2005. Yeah, he, paid his dues to get there. So, yeah, I think he has Michigan back on the right track, at least for the moment. Like I said, time will tell as far as, long term, do they stay that way? And, I'm not saying that Michigan basketball isn't a good place to be at, but, kind of like we've talked about, even with, Kurt Signetti on IU football, is it potentially a stepping stone to try to move somewhere else in the future if, say, one of these long-term coaches decides to retire or go somewhere else?
Or like a school close to home.
Potentially, yeah.
Vacancy type of thing.
If, hey, Mike Woodson's gone. Hey, Dusty, you're only making...
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Make it under $4 million now. Why don't you
talking about that in a minute?
Back.
Let's talk about the standings a little bit more. Another team that I think, and you can tell me what your thoughts are, that people really need to pay attention to when it comes to the Big Ten. Obviously, their fans already know about them, but UCLA has won 6 in a row. They're 17-6 overall, 8-4 in the Big Ten. They are tied for 4th place with Wisconsin. I think it's really the preseason vote was Purdue, IU, UCLA. UCLA looks like they're starting to rise back up and get their act together, Tony.
Yeah. And they had that really good streak there. They beat Gonzaga. Then you kind of notice when they really got into true Big Ten play, they stumbled a little bit. They had that four-game losing streak, and then much to your point, they've been on a 6-game winning streak ever since. They beat Wisconsin, they beat Oregon, and they beat Michigan State. Now, keep in mind, all those were at home, and they've only got 4 road games left, but their schedule, honestly, at the end, not exactly bad. They host Penn State.
They do have to travel to Mackey.
They do. They have to host Penn State. They have to travel and face Illinois. And kind of like you talked about, Illinois has been up and down all year, all season. They're the team that I feel like they could compete with anybody, but they're also going to play down to anybody that they face too. So that could go either way. They go to Bloomington, which again, I feel like IU's kind of in the same boat. They are extremely hot and cold. Who knows what Hoosier team you're going to get when you go down there. Yeah. They have to host Minnesota. Now, Minnesota, not exactly slouches. They've been getting some sucker punches in here and there on some teams.
Ranked teams.
Yeah. Then you've got Ohio State, kind of the same thing. I mean, Ohio State shocked the world, and they beat your Boilermakers of all teams, believe it or not. Wait a minute. Ohio State did what? You guys are not on a football field. You don't usually beat Purdue like this, especially in basketball. Now, of course, they have to travel to Mackey to face Purdue, so that'll be a real test for them. And then they finish the season against Northwestern and USC.
Bless
Sorry,
you.
excuse me. Thank you. So I mean, realistically, looking at that schedule, that's not exactly it. I'm not going to say it's a cakewalk schedule, but
It's definitely not the hardest schedule left.
That's a very winnable schedule. I mean, I could very easily see them finishing. Let's see, that's what 3, 6. That's 8 games. I could see them finishing what 6-2. So they're going to finish about 23-8, maybe even better than that potentially. So I mean, that's pretty decent, and
That'd
even
put them at
14.
That put them at 14-6 in the Big Ten. That's not a bad season.
That's pretty good first year in the Big Ten.
Yeah. The one thing is pretty much ever since Mick Cronin kind of threw everybody under the bus and said, you know what, none of these guys even wanted to play. They just don't seem like they want to play. Since then, they've gone on that 6-game win streak that just this is the UCLA a lot of people were expecting.
Yeah.
Which is why they were voted in the preseason in the top 3 to finish.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at them; they're there, and so the only one that's not holding their part of the deal is IU, and we'll talk about them on the other side of the break. But before we go to the break, we talked about Maryland and how they really had started coming through and winning a lot of games, playing really, really, really good basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go in, last night and get beat by Ohio State. That to me says one of two things: Ohio State's better than what their record is right now.
Yeah,
they've been a little bit up and down as well. Mm-hmm. But with as to Maryland, I'm really glad Purdue played them in the first half of in the first portion of the season, and they don't play them again.
right. Yeah, and much to your point too, like you said, I feel like Ohio State, their record is better. They're better than what their record says, because you have to think they started out the year, they get an upset win over number 19 Texas. Now they did get now they lost to Maryland in College Park pretty badly the first time, and then they got
a lot of teams do,
and then they got destroyed by Auburn. But then after that,
a lot of teams do.
They absolutely dominated Kentucky in Columbus. They lose a close one to Michigan State. They lose a close one to Oregon, a close one to Wisconsin, a close one to IU. Then they, shock Purdue. Mm-hmm. They beat Iowa. And then, they lose a close one to Illinois, and then they beat Maryland. So this is definitely an Ohio State team that I feel, especially with them and a head coach, because you got to remember they did a head coaching change last year, and they finished on a pretty good hot streak. Now, I think this is still an Ohio State team that people I don't think took as lightly as they did last year. I think last year it was, okay, well, Ohio State's already down in the dumps. It's kind of a dumpster fire. They were getting the crap kicked out of them all the time. This year, okay, wait a minute. They ended the year on what, like a 6 or 7 game win streak last year, if I remember right. He was like 7-1 as the interim.
6-game win streak, I think, and I think they won 9 of 11, maybe.
Yeah, they were pretty good at the end of the season last year. So I think a lot of teams took that into, okay, this guy knows how to coach. He knows how to get the best out of his players. We should probably not take Ohio State necessarily for granted. And I think that's starting to come to fruition in Columbus too, with the coaching change there of, okay, new guy, new culture, seems to be able to get the best out of his players there. So that's another one that I feel maybe not this year, but potentially next year. Could we maybe make an argument that the Buckeyes might make some noise and maybe finish a little bit higher than what they're going to finish this year? I mean,
it's quite possible. Right now, they're 6-6 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, which isn't bad. They're just above the middle.
Not bad, but they don't have a real daunting schedule. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to lose 3 or 4 of these games. Right. But they have at Nebraska, home to Washington, home to Michigan, home to Northwestern, at UCLA, at USC, home to Nebraska, and finish the season at IU. Those are all winnable games, minus maybe the trip to UCLA and maybe that Michigan game.
Right.
The rest are very winnable. And honestly, I'm not saying they couldn't beat Michigan. I'm not saying they couldn't beat UCLA. But realistically, they're going to drop 2 at least games of these final 8, so they could finish 12-8 in the Big Ten. That to me is good enough to get you to the NCAA. It just is. That's another 6 that put him at 20 wins, and I think that might be a 7, 8, 9, 10 seed somewhere in there.
Yeah, and so to look at it, so Jake Diebler, he finished last year as the interim. He finished 8-3. They were 5-1 in the conference.
That's what it was. Okay.
And then this year they're 13-9. He's 5-6. So he's had a little bit of a downgrade, but he's also getting to play a full season, whereas he only came in at the end of last year. So I do agree. I think for Ohio State, the schedule isn't exactly, it's not bad.
It's doable.
It's doable. I mean, like you said, I could very easily see him being able to win a good chunk of those. I mean, Washington, not Washington.
5 or 6 of those 8.
Yeah. Because I mean, you have to face Nebraska twice. Nebraska is another one. I feel like kind of hot and cold. You don't really know what you're going to get with that. Michigan and UCLA is really 2 of the harder ones. And again, IU, I feel like it could honestly be a coin flip with them. But I mean, they only lost by a point last time they faced IU, and that was in Columbus. So who knows how it'll be when they go down to Bloomington.
Will be mighty interesting to see how it works out for the Buckeyes. But as a Boilermaker fan, I'm looking forward to the final few weeks. It's not going to be an easy final few weeks, but I think that makes them better for March. But let's go ahead, take a quick break for the audio podcast. You're listening to Big Talk on the Believe and Lounge Sports Network. All right, we're back. Just a few minutes before we wrap up, Tony. News out of Bloomington yesterday. Men's basketball coach Mike Woodson, I think it was officially said, probably will not return next year. I also saw another thing saying he's contemplating retiring. I think it's you retire or you're fired. Yeah. But what does this do for the seemingly ever changing carousel, coaching carousel at Indiana University?
I mean, I think it opens the door for them to try to get somebody like a Dusty May, who to me has a better overall proven track record for being a good college coach anyway. Mm-hmm. I remember you kind of telling the story. And I can't remember if you told it on air or if you told it off, but that you knew somebody who,
Marvin Williams Sr.
Right. Who, his son, if I remember correctly, you said was there at the Hawks when he was the head coach of
number 2 pick in 2005.
And, said that, Mike Williams Sr. felt that he definitely destroyed his son's career. Marvin, sorry. Destroyed his career as a head coach. And, it is one of those, when you look at this, he primarily was a coach. Actually, he was only a coach in the NBA. He had never been a college coach at all. And that's a huge difference. I know for some people it's, well, coaching is still coaching. There's a difference between how you kind of talk to grown men who make millions of dollars and you also make millions of dollars to talk to them, and kids coming out of high school who, you got to remember, they're still kids. You still have to teach them. You have to instill a lot of discipline. You have to develop them. You have to recruit well. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, you were an NBA head coach, but you weren't really successful anywhere. I don't remember Atlanta winning any championships from 2004 to 2010.
No.
The Knicks sure as heck didn't in 2012 and 2014. No. And then basically after that, you were an assistant coach the entire time. So what do you really know about being a true successful coach, even at the professional level? Now, not dismissing that, because I mean, there's not a whole lot of people could say, yeah, I was a coach in the NBA.
You don't get multiple head coaching jobs by accident.
Correct. So there is something there, but it is different when you go to the college level, because again, they're still kids. These are kids that are 17, 18 years old. They don't even know themselves yet. They're still trying to figure out life on top of playing a sport that they might potentially go professional for, and figuring out, okay, How do I do this to make my game better? How do I do this to, get myself prepared to go into the league? There's a lot that goes into it, and you can't just, kind of, I don't want to say BS your way through it, but that's kind of what it reminds me of with Mike Woodson of, oh, I can just, do this in college and it'll be perfectly fine. If anything, I'll be even better because it's a step down from the professional level.
Yeah, a professional coach at the NBA level is completely less part of the program and the culture than a college coach. The college coach sets the culture. And excuse me, as a Purdue fan, yay! But I honestly extend Mike Woodson. I've been saying that since the start of the struggles. But that's me as a Purdue fan. Okay, you've heard me say this multiple times. I've said it multiple times on my other podcast as well. College basketball and the Big Ten are better when IU is better.
Yeah.
So the problem that IU runs into right now is they can't afford yet another miss.
Right.
So whatever coach they end up going with, do they throw the bank to try to get somebody like Dusty May? He just literally settled into Ann Arbor. We're talking about him in the first half of the show, Tony, as we're surprised at what Michigan's done because he's a first-year coach in Ann Arbor. Is he going to uproot again to stay within the same conference, or is he going to say, nah, as much as I would like to, I'm going to see I'm going to ride this out and see where it goes?
You never know. I mean, right now his annual salary is, $3.75 million annually. I mean, who's to say IU comes out and says, hey, we'll pay you what, $4 and a quarter, $4.5 million, maybe even $5 million.
But is that enough to make him move?
I have no idea. The other thing that I saw will potentially be a very big attractive spot for them as far as the IU job is the fact that they're coming into with one of the most NIL money as far as the basketball side goes. So that's supposed to be also pretty attractive as far as you have more leverage to sign, better players and whatnot, and kind of, build your legacy, per se, as far as that goes. So I don't know if it's enough to pull Dusty away from that. From what it sounds like from a couple IU fans I've heard, it's almost like the athletic director and them kind of have a good old boys club for who do we like the best and who do we want to bring in, which is supposedly how Mike Woodson got the job. Again, I have no proof of that.
If that's the case, Tony, I hope they continue to it because that means they're just going to keep struggling. Rather than getting the best man for the job, they're just getting who they want to see coach. It's not who do we think is going to succeed, and good for them.
Yeah. So who struggles with that on a very day-to-day basis? 100% of Dallas Cowboys fans since the year 1996 with Jerry Jones. It's not about who's the best coach. It's Jerry Jones's world, and we're just living in it.
That's right. Well, it'll be fun to see where that develops. That's a couple of months down the road because they're not going to make a move on anybody, I doubt, until well after the tournament has started. So we've got about probably a month and a half before that.
Well, quick funny thing, though. What if he pulls a Ryan Day? What if IU just goes on a hot streak and wins the whole thing? Do they keep him?
I say extend him.
Never know. Never know.
That brings us to the end of the show. Tony, it's all you.
You can find us on Facebook at Big Talk. That's B1G Talk on Facebook, and on TikTok, Instagram, and X at B1G_Talk. That's Big Talk with a 1 instead of an I_Talk. You can find us now 2 times a week on the All Sports All Plays Network, only because we want to make sure that when we bring you guys all the news, all the topics on Big Talk, that we're not repeating ourselves and we're not, just kind of fluffing stuff and making the content not as great as it usually is. We just want to make sure that we're giving exactly dad jokes, corny jokes, all that. We want to make sure we're giving the best product. So only 2 times a week. Don't know the days, but you will get it 2 times a week
for the time being. Right now, Monday, Friday.
Okay. And then you can always find the podcast later wherever you catch your podcast through the through Believe and through the Lounge Sports Network as I ride the struggle bus to no end.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us on this edition of Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. For Tony Hollinsworth, I'm Sam Sprunger.